Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, all right, let's do it. Another History Matters video I saw is came out the 4th. One of you guys brought up a great point on a History Matters video that I did like a week ago. I didn't notice it was on the same day, and even if I did, I'm not sure I wouldn't have done it. But one of you guys made a comment how I shouldn't react to a video on YouTube that the channel that made the video just put out that same day, because it might be parasitic in terms of it might take away views from their own video. And that's a great point, honestly, and you're just helping me be a better reaction channel. But yeah, why did Britain abolish slavery? History Matters. I don't exactly know the reasons. I believe they were backing the Confederates at first to protect cotton imports, but then quickly saw where the moral fight around the war was, and saw that they were clearly on the wrong side, and they switched. But I don't know completely. So let's learn. Let's go.
The abolition of slavery and the slave trade is often cited.
If you hear any construction noises, hammering, sorry, got to deal with it. There's some shingling going on the house outside. So let's go.
The abolition of slavery and the slave trade is often cited as one of the proudest moments in British history. Britain certainly wasn't the first nation.
Sorry, I got to read those.
Cited as one of the
abolishing slavery, beating the French, largest empire, inventing industry, beating the Germans, borrowing Ireland, winning the World Cup, beating the Spanish. What year did they win the World Cup? I'm sure they must have at least once. Beating the Spanish, inventing gravity, inventing capitalism.
The proudest moments in British history. Britain certainly wasn't the first nation to abolish it, nor would it be the last, but Britain's abolition was followed by a concerted effort to end it worldwide. In 1772, an English court declared that standing on English soil automatically made a man free, because Parliament had never gone to the effort to introduce slavery legally. Across the empire, the slave trade was abolished in 1807, but not the institution of slavery itself. This meant that people could continue to own slaves, but generally couldn't buy or sell them. The owning of slaves itself was outlawed throughout the British Empire in 1833, with the exception of India and a few other territories. This, notably, came at an incredible cost to the British Treasury, since they opted to pay the slave owners for their lost revenues. In fact,
Sorry, the hammering. I gotta deal with the hammering out there. I don't know how hard it is on you guys on the audio coming out.
Incredible cost to the British Treasury, since they opted to pay the slave owners for their lost revenues. In fact, the British government got into so much debt for this that the loan taken out by Prime Minister Viscount Melbourne wasn't paid off until the premiership of David Cameron in 2015. If slavery was still incredibly lucrative, why did Britain not only end it but place itself into a mountain of debt whilst also further committing to end it globally? Now, there were many reasons, but the first is perhaps the most obvious. It was seen as being morally abhorrent. Famous abolitionists such as William Wilberforce or Henry Thornton argued that Britain had a special duty as a Christian empire to end slavery throughout the world. Another reason for ending slavery throughout the British Empire was purely empire to...
Sorry, I love how every time Jesus is represented in History Matters, he's got the holes in the hands. I guess you should have him in the feet, I guess, too.
End slavery throughout the world. Another reason for ending slavery throughout the British Empire was purely economic. Whilst the slave trade was profitable, slavery itself, particularly that in the Caribbean sugar plantations, was becoming less so. Furthermore, most of the empire's money was now being made in China and India. I mean, why sell people to the Caribbean when you can simply sell drugs to the Chinese instead? The final reason was political.
Free.
In the late 18th century, there had been a large to the Chinese instead. The final reason was political. In the late 18th century, there had been a large colonial lobby in Parliament who sought to have the interests of slave owners taken into account. With the American Revolution out of the way, the number of slaves and slave owners in the empire was now halved, and so who cared what they thought anymore? After the formal abolition, Britain committed the Royal Navy to patrolling the Atlantic Ocean to end the slave trade for everyone, irrespective of whether or not they wanted to. So just because slavery had been abolished, that didn't mean that things improved immediately for the recently freed. Most either continued working on plantations for poor wages or were simply left to starve. That said, some efforts were made to take former slaves to Sierra Leone, one of the many African colonies set up to take former slaves. Furthermore, Britain was pursuing free trade during parts of the 19th century, which meant that for many years Britons were still buying sugar from slave plantations, not to mention cotton from places like the American South. British India continued to use a system of near slavery called indenturing until 1860, and the empire profited massively from these practices. Britain undoubtedly had a large hand in ending the global slave trade and dedicated a colossal amount of money and effort towards doing so. Britain had given up on the slave...
Sorry guys, I don't know how loud that banging is. Okay. Okay.
profited massively from these practices. Britain undoubtedly had a large hand in ending the global slave trade and dedicated a colossal amount of money and effort towards doing so. Britain had given up on the slave trade, but that didn't mean it no longer profited from slavery, at least in the short term. The difficulty of this topic comes from weighing up the value of Britain being at the forefront of abolitionism against the fact that over the centuries it was responsible for the sale of over 3 million people. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, and a special thanks to all of these patrons you see on screen for their
Awesome video as always from History Matters. I guess, so early on, I know that, the triangle trade, I think one of the major points was right over here in Newport, which is like 25 minutes away from me. And I believe one was in London. Tell me if I'm wrong, by the way. The classic, when you think of the triangular trade, Western Africa, Newport, and London, but I guess it could almost be like a square trade with one part being in the Caribbean to put them over there. Again, History Matters never meant to go into big detail, just being the short videos they are, but kind of introducing you to topics that you can then go deeper on in other videos or your own, personal research. Awesome video, interesting. Be back at least one more video, if not 2 videos today. See you next time.